Hi, my name is Dennis Katolin. This is my video assignment addressing deterrence theory, and how this applies to modern security challenges. Now, when it comes to this topic, you probably expect me to apply it to America's strategic concerns, such as the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and how to keep Vladimir Putin from using all those many nuclear weapons that he has against the Ukrainians or America's NATO allies. Perhaps you expect me to address China and the growing tensions between the U.S. and the PRC over the Taiwan situation and preventing China's use of force against the Taiwanese people. Like Putin, Xi has a lot of military might, a growing naval fleet, sophisticated cyber capabilities, and again, many nuclear weapons. While these threats do pose a substantial risk to America's strategic interests, I feel that deterrence theory is needed on a much more important subject, my strategic interests. Specifically, coffee. That's right, my coffee. After serving this great nation for more than 20 years all over the world, I can attest to the fact that there is no greater force multiplier than the sweet, caffeinated elixir of energy that powers America's mighty military guardians of liberty. While resources like oil and computer chips and, freedom and liberty are all well and good, nothing is more important than a good cup of coffee. And it is on this issue that I have a most pressing concern. Both Putin and Xi are authoritarians who rule with an iron fist, have no respect for the rules-based international order, and are threatening freedom and liberty around the world with violence and tyranny. America's greatest strategists have overlooked the true face of fear, the great tormentors of my life, my children. Madeline, Sam, and Elise are great kids. Mother and I love them dearly. But they recently have come across the terrible realization that they can deny us our cups of coffee in the morning because they feel we're overdoing it. So what's a guy to do? A much-needed resource is being denied me. I had to deter the kids from continuing this action. I did what any good father would do. I turned to the sound fatherly advice of Prussian war theorist Karl von Clausewitz and economist-turned-game theorist-turned-deterrence theorist Thomas Schelling. So let's first talk about deterrence in broad strokes, then specifically about Tom Schelling and how he helped better understand the art and science of deterrence, and how I can use him to get my cup of joe. Deterrence is the practice of discouraging or restraining someone, usually a nation state, from taking unwanted actions, such as an armed attack. Ultimately, deterring means to stop something. This is complementary but distinct to compellence, which focuses primarily on forcing a specific action. Most theorists agree that deterrence comes in two forms, denial or punishment. Deterrence by denial affects the adversary's calculus by impacting their understanding of whether or not they can succeed. Deterrence by punishment, however, uses the threat of penalties if an undesired action occurs. Most classic studies suggest that denial strategies are inherently more reliable than punishment strategies. As Thomas Schelling noted, there are threats that a state would rather not fulfill, and weakness in deterrence can emerge when an aggressor believes that the defender will ultimately prove unwilling to carry out its threats. Deterrence, by either denial or punishment, comes in two forms. The first is direct deterrence, which is designed by preventing an attack on its own territory. So this would apply to the U.S. when deterring Russia and China from attacking America's homeland. For our purposes, this directly addresses my personal desire to deter my children from denying me my cup of coffee. The second type of deterrence is extended deterrence, which focuses on discouraging an attack on third parties. This would apply to the U.S. deterring Russia from attacking its partners and allies, specifically the Ukraine, which is a partner to NATO, as well as America's NATO allies proper. Regarding China, extended deterrence would apply to America's deterring the PRC's aggression towards Taiwan, the Philippines, or other partners and allies in the region. Again, applying this specifically to me, this is me deterring my kids from not just taking away my coffee, but taking away my wife's coffee. After all, marriage is basically a lifetime political alliance, and what kids clearly do not understand is that when it comes to mom and dad, an attack on one is an attack on all. So, now that we have the basics of deterrence down, let's give Thomas Schelling a look. Thomas Schelling was an American economist and professor of foreign policy, national security, nuclear strategy, and arms control at the University of Maryland. He was also a co-faculty member at the New England Complex System Institute. He also attended a little-known school in Massachusetts called Harvard. In a piece he wrote called The Strategy of Conflict in 1960, Schelling pioneered the study of bargaining and strategic behavior in what he refers to as, quote, conflict behavior. Schelling distinguishes between conflict and cooperation, emphasizing that conflict capability was a valuable tool that should be overt and rarely applied, whereas cooperation is the most valuable aspect of diplomacy that facilitates deterrence, limitations on wars, and disarmament, as well as negotiations. He emphasized the importance of communication as either explicit, which often appears like a negotiation with some give and take occurring between two sides. An alternative to explicit communication is tacit maneuvers. This is communication through actions which are left to interpretation, but intended to inform and affect the other's calculus. In 1966, Schelling wrote Arms and Influence, which addressed the link between diplomacy and military capabilities. He emphasized the need to understand the cognitive process of one's adversaries in order to influence their desired outcomes. He noted that the problem with tools of modern warfare is that it is difficult to secure one's political objectives solely through military force, thus putting the onus on the state leaders to know how to use force persuasively and to, in effect, cajole the opponent to concede out of fear of potential military retaliation, or what game theorists describe as manipulation of risk. The power to hurt is bargaining power, Schelling wrote. To exploit it is diplomacy. Vicious diplomacy, but diplomacy nonetheless. Schelling applied game theory and deterrence in his Nobel Prize-winning work titled The Reciprocal Fear of Surprise Attack. This work emphasizes the effect of nervousness and fear of deterrence. Fear is the optimum word here. Deterrence is derived from the Latin word terror. Schelling knew this and believed that while deterrence must affect the actor's rational calculus, it must also invoke certain emotions, specifically fear. While cost-benefit calculations rely on known inputs, deterrence focuses primarily on uncertainty surrounding those inputs. While sometimes fear of a very undesirable outcome can induce fear, Schelling pointed out that deterrence is often enhanced by not being entirely clear on declaratory threats, which meant leaving some things to chance. In essence, deterrence leverages uncertainty instead of eliminating it. This is where America's strategic ambiguity regarding Taiwan plays an effective role in affecting Xi's calculus. Yeah, that's all well and good, but how does this apply to what matters the most right now, which is my coffee? After realizing they were going to take it away from me, I was resolute in ensuring that I used the three fundamental steps of deterrence. A, I was going to demonstrate a credible capability to get it back. B, show resolve to get it back. And C, communicate that I wanted it back.
I've done it! I made the perfect cup of coffee!
What? What did you do this time?
The perfect cup of coffee is a gateway to addiction.
They'll be so addicted they won't even get us presents.
You're right, we have to keep it out of their hands.
We gotta get these cups away from each other.
Do you smell that?
Yeah, what do you think that is?
I think it's a perfect cup of coffee.
What should we do?
We need to get the coffee away from them.
I mean, Mom and Pappy are downstairs.
So let's bring the coffee upstairs.
That's a good idea.
But we need to hurry. Uh-oh, something's wrong. Guys!
They're here!
This is how an angel does. Blame it on my own surprise. Blame it on my ADD, baby. Sail.
Uh-oh.
Did you get it?
I don't think so.
And there it is. I had failed. While I both communicated my desire for coffee and demonstrated resolve to get it, I had failed to make the case for credible capability. Look at that guy.
What have you done?
Sorry, Mom. He gave us no choice.
No one puts Pappy in the corner.
But there she was, my partner in life and one true love. Upon seeing me defeated on the ground, she decided to go from deterrence to coercion by going on the offensive. Upon seeing that this approach was going nowhere, Andrea decided to give deterrence one last try. Rather than deterrence by punishment, she decided to do deterrence by denial.
If you don't give me that coffee right now, then no presents for you.
Bow to me faithfully, bow to me splendidly, bow to me faithfully, bow to me splendidly.
And there you go. The children gave us back our coffee, order was restored, and we all lived happily ever after. Thanks to Karl von Clausewitz and Tom Schelling for helping us understand how to effectively live in a world of chaos and uncertainty. Our kids and our marriage are better off for it. God bless. Semper Fi.